6:30 p.m. Cameroon time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us in tonight's edition of Viewpoint on DBS television. You can equally watch us live on Facebook or through our website. In tonight's edition, we are going to be talking about education and the role it plays in the entire society, trying to find out whether it is a business or these private institutions are out to help government institutions in enrolling or educating the society. And to talk about this, we are having with us a Pan-Africanist with us here, Derek Galim. He is our regular guest, and of course he has made it again possible to be available for today's edition. Derek Galim, good evening and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Vanessa. Thanks for inviting.
It is our pleasure always having you or showing up whenever you are called upon to.
Thank you.
Mangavenashus, good evening and thank you also for coming.
Good evening, Vanessa. Good evening to our viewers who are watching us. Vanessa, if you permit me, I will greet one person with your permission.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Permit me extend greetings to our viewers who are watching us from Ngaundal. Ngaundal in Adamawa region. I'm thinking of Stella. Stella is a cousin of mine. She's there in Ngaundal, and she's certainly watching us at this evening, as she has been doing.
And the special greeting goes to our correspondent there, Awal Mohamadu. Very often he reacts at the background of the show. Let us take a first part that has to do with the questions and answers. If you are just joining us, you're watching Viewpoint on DBS television. In the first question, can we consider lay private education in Cameroon as a business enterprise? Derek, your point of view?
I would say it is.
Yes. Venashus, are you of the same opinion?
Yes, to a certain extent, because it is for some and it is not for others.
So yes and no?
Yes and no, yes.
Yes and no. Can the government succeed in regulating the sector? Derek?
It can.
It can. Venashus?
It can to a certain extent as well, Vanessa. Yes and no.
Yes. Which one is the greatest?
Yes.
To the greatest extent. Let us have the debate. Can we consider lay private education in Cameroon as a business enterprise? Derek, you think that yes, we should consider it as a business enterprise. We know that when we talk of the private educational sector, we know it carries the bulky or the heavier aspect of educating Cameroonians as a whole. So why should we be looking at it more of a business enterprise rather than an entity meant to assist the government in carrying out their duties?
It is true, they say every cloud has a silver lining. I will not condemn it entirely, but on the larger scale, we would acknowledge the fact that it is more of a business enterprise. The state has not failed in its duty to provide education to Cameroonians. They may be slow. It's a dictum of our government. State machinery is always slow but steady. And if I'm here to answer this question today, is after a good number of years of observing, let me say from the inside as well. And I appreciate the fact that after the 1879 revolution, the French Constitution, we're a French colony, we should admit that. The French Constitution held that the state should provide free, compulsory secular education for its citizens. It's a lofty idea. I think it glitters, right? But I would say not all that glitters is gold. Of course, they call it free secular education. But how free is our education? There are a number of reasons. We called it an enterprise. True. An enterprise is a willingness to take risks. Educational risk here we're talking about. But I would say the one in our context is a hazardous risk. Why hazardous? What is the end product? of our educational system, if I may ask. It is no news that Cameroonians now are ranging among the highest unemployed. The youth are ranging among the highest unemployed people we could have around. What is the reason? Because of the lack of the value that the education is supposed to have. That is why you would have Cameroonian students being retrenched to sub-levels when they go abroad to join their peers, either in master's degree levels or in PhD levels. They're always retrenched back to degree levels, despite the fact that they already have degrees, right? It's not news. My question is, if the educational journey in Cameroon was actually out to provide quality educational services to Cameroonians, why would the quality keep dwindling or diminishing as years pass by instead of advancing? It just tells us that the value is somewhere else. The efficiency that is supposed to be put in building up the competencies of Cameroonian youths, unfortunately, lies somewhere else. Yes, it is a willingness to take a risk. It's also a willingness to take an initiative. But how productive would your initiative be if it's being stifled from above? What is the context of the curricular books that we use in Cameroon education, for example? You would admit with me that we still have a bulk of textbooks that are provided by the colonial master. Are those textbooks there because they want Cameroonians to improve? I tell you, it's because of the bunch of billions that the master gets out of it. Lay private education, it's split in two. We would admit that. There is lay private contract schools and there is lay private autonomous schools. Lay private means you may have what we call international schools or American schools or whatsoever. The intention is, if they are set up by foreigners, they should abide with state policy, but their internal financial affairs are determined by their home countries or by the entrepreneurs themselves. But lay private contract education is what we could refer to here as lay private schools in Cameroon. But I bet you they didn't come into the scene because the government was unable to provide education to Cameroonians. They came because it is a gold mine. And I would like to ask a question. What justifies the fact that the very quality of education that public schools provide, what we call state schools, they provide at a very minimal amount? It's the same quality of education provided by what we refer to as lay private schools here, but at amounts which are so suffocating that just a few privileged could be able to.
Probably because, like you, the name rightly distinguishes the difference. You are talking of the state and you are talking of private individuals running schools.
True. And if you look at it, education as put by the colonial master and is supposed to be implemented by the government. It's supposed to be some sort of a social service for the public good. Which means the state is supposed to do everything to put things in place in such a way that even the poorest could be able to get the education. But despite the fact that there is a state regulatory body, things still keep going the wrong way. It is true. All because of a lot of lip rubbing.
We'll come to get your point till the end. For the meantime, let us see whether in an attempt Mange Venashus will give a clear response to your question or your doubt. Mange Venashus, you equally think that this lay private education sector in Cameroon is a business enterprise?
Yes.
You're kind of you're on the fence.
Yes, Vanessa, it is a business, it's a business in Cameroon on one hand, and on the other hand, it is not. When we are talking of the private schools in Cameroon, and when we talk of private schools in Cameroon, like Mr. Ngalim was saying, we have what we call the lay private sector in Cameroon, and we have what we call the lay confessional. Some other people call it mission schools.
Mission schools.
Yes. When you take the lay private schools, In fact, when we say private school and we attach the word lay, it is a lay person, you and I, an individual or a collection of individuals who can come up and set a school and it is running in the country. Now, we know that it is a government's duty to assure, the education of its citizens of a country like Cameroon. And Cameroon government has been doing that. That is why you can have something like some time ago here, they announced that we have that education in the primary sector is free, in Cameroon. How free it is, that I can't answer. But then, if you look at it, take for example, like Mr. Ngalim was asking, if you look at the quality of education that is given, when you just go from the base of a teacher, they tell you that teachers who go in to teach in government schools, they are supposed to be the best teachers. They are supposed to be those who are those who are trained, from teacher training colleges. The best teachers are those who are going into government schools. Now, when you take these very best teachers who are teaching in government schools, for example, government university, the fee is just approximately about 50,000 francs. But when you go to a lay private institution, you get the fee that 450,000, 500, 700,000 francs for the same. You obtain the same first degree like you obtain in a state university. That is where when you put the two, you see the concept of business and the concept of responsibility, concept of duty. Because the state has a duty. That is why you pay at the minimum 50,000 francs at least to compensate. And the school, the government subsidizes the rest. But then in lay private schools, you have the cost as expensive as what we have. In that case, it's the business. It is somebody's business or a group of people who come up and form their business. That is why in lay private schools, you have the founding principal or the founding proprietor who runs the school. It is his business. He does not give an account to anybody to say, at the end of this year, this is what we've had. They may do their auditing, but for their own internal use. It is not for anybody. But take, for example, in the state university, once they are doing an audit, they have a budget that the university runs. And that's what they want to know. Because they just know that they have 750 students in this school. Just calculate times 50,000, that is what they will have. And and then the state subsidizes the rest. But then in a lay private, they have to do so because they pay their teachers. They provide for the didactic material, for the needs of the school, and at the end of the day, they are able to see whether they are breaking even or they are not breaking even. In that case, that is business. But when you look at confessional schools, they will tell us that they have a mission to educate the youth. I take, for example, the Catholic schools. They will tell you that most of these schools, they are run by certain congregations, and these congregations have what they call their charism. Their charism is as their main, their main occupation, their own aspect of evangelization is to promote maybe the care of the youth, or maybe the care of the girl child, maybe taking care of the less privileged in the society. That is their own duty, and that is why they come in to carry out that education, to educate this section of the population. So when you look at it, you see that they have a target which is not to make money, because if you have to ask what is the cost of paying the teachers, what is the cost of running the school, and then compare it with the school fee, you will see that they are at that point they are trying to see that they carry out the duty of educating their target, But then in lay private school, it is a pure business that somebody is running, because that individual will not get up and say, I wanted to help Cameroonians, or I wanted to help the government in doing this. They are not helping the government.
So does that take us back to the place where in most of lay private schools, you see every year they do increase the fee of the students, but then the teachers are not being well paid? Correct.
That is where I wanted to land, because when I was talking about Catholic schools, I talk of they had to break even. But in lay private schools, they, like you are saying, they run the school, they increase the fee, they don't decide the fee with anybody. They decide that we are going to add 10,000 francs this year, and there is nobody who would question them whether they are also increasing the salaries of the teachers. That is why, and what is happening, Vanessa, if you have to look at it, which I would think that, anyway, we'll come to it in question 2, that we should be able to find out, the government should be able to find out the treatment that is given to the workers in these schools. Because when you look at the fee that is paid, and you look at what is paid to the teacher as a salary, just take per student or per child and see what percentage comes to the teacher as a salary. You really see this kind of exploitation, that they are exploiting parents in the name of education, because they present very lofty goals. They present very lofty goals. We want to take care. Our interest is the student. The interest is not the student. We give the best
quality education.
We give the best quality education. But when you look at it, that's what I said. Best teachers who are trained, they come from they are in government schools, because they come out from government teacher training colleges. But then in lay private schools, it suffices that you maybe have a degree for those who have it, and some are just for school living holders, A-level holders, and they are teaching. So when you put them together, you really see that there is a difference, Vanessa, and because the amount that they collect, how they manage the amount. At the end of the year, I would expect that these proprietors should call for a meeting, because when they say there is a PTA meeting, they come together. The PTA meeting, parents, you should do this. Nobody will ever tell you that we collected 10 million this year, we use 5 million in running of school, we use 2 million in paying of teachers, we use 3 million, and then 1 million francs. Nobody, you never had such about of account. You just come there and say, parents, you have to do this, do this. For that reason, we have increased fee. Nobody goes back to what happened last year. And if they have to go back last year, they criticize parents that you people did not finish your school fees. So I rather think that they should be able to come out and tell parents that if actually they are out to help the government, educate Cameroonians, they should be able to tell parents that this is what we collected, this is how we manage the school, this is how we manage the amount that was collected, this is the leftover, or we operated in a deficit. Because when you discuss with some confessional schools, they will tell you that at the end of the year, we operated on a deficit. But the target was not to make money, the target was to make sure that we teach Cameroonians.
Thank you very much, Mange Venajus. Derek, so how can the government regulate this sector?
Anyhow, regulating the sector, I would say, from the beginning of my debate, I did make mention of the fact that there is what we call lay private contract schools. Contract, why? Because you are helping the government to do its job, and you are going to do it according to the rules and regulations laid down by the state. If you look at law number 2004/022 of 22nd July 2004, right, it lays down clearly the rules and regulations that are supposed to regulate the functioning of lay private schools in Cameroon. And if you go by the law, let us say it is so articulately written, so clearly written, that you would think that things on the ground should be as perfect as they are stated in the law. But the unfortunate thing is, when you go down from the curriculum design, you discover that the curriculum is designed to favor he who provides either the textbooks that are used in the schools, irrespective of whether the content of the material is adequate to what the students are supposed to receive. But you begin to ask questions. How were the findings done before the decision on what textbooks Cameroonian schools should use? Were they properly done? No, they were decided from above, depending on the interest of the person who decides. And the books are pushed down on the various families. Let me say to the families, because the school becomes an entrepreneurial venture and the parents become the customers. The children are just there as the link between the businessman and
the customers.
And when you look at it, a proprietor gets up, he decides to run a school. The first thing he does is he opens a designer industry, because he knows he will produce and sell his uniforms.
His uniforms, maybe his shoes as well.
Yes, he opens a printing press, because he knows he will provide books to students. That's why you see majority of the schools, they say the school fee is 800,000 francs.
Including the books, the uniforms, the
textbooks, the uniforms, textbooks, everything is going to be included. And then you get to schools even where report cards are supposed to be provided to students. You discover that report cards are printed, and the parents are obliged to buy an extra designed booklet in which a report card once printed, which could be handed directly to the parents, is still inserted before giving to the parents. Where does the money for that booklet go to? Who regulates it? And when you go to government schools, you don't see booklets, public schools. According to the law, the government is supposed to run down to these institutions, regulate stuff, and be sure that it goes according to what that law I was quoting here states. But is it done? It is not done. Which means no matter how lofty the laws look on the papers, there is no follow-up for implementation. They are produced, it's about packaging, right? Like Mr. Venantius was saying, it's about packaging. I make the campus to look as beautiful as anything, so that when I hit a high price, nobody gets to complain. But am I paying for the beauty of the school campus?
Yeah, most parents will go for that prestige
of the education
syndrome
that the child is supposed to receive. You discover that it's just a deceptive embellishment, right? And the government knows what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't step in. You find someone writes a book which ridiculously is about 25 pages. And what is the market price? At times you go as a parent, you have to pay for it for 3,500 francs for a 15-page book. And the state has produced a book list. There is supposed to be a price regulatory board. But what the members of those boards or committees do is they just get to the proprietors and producers, get their envelopes, and go back.
So now that the rules on papers and are not being applied in the field, how should government authorities go about it? Because the rules are there already, but now schools are not implementing them.
If the rules are already there and very beautifully written, like I was saying, I quoted a law here. It's an entire document from 2004, and it's so beautifully written. When you go through, you feel like this is supposed to be a perfect context, right? But the issue here is the fact that there is a certain deep-seated corruption that is practiced right from the top, and it goes right down to people who are supposed to render a service regulated by the state, and those who are in the field to control or to do the checks, to bring things to normal. They will not do it. They know what they're supposed to do, but they won't do it because the interest lies elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Derek. Manga Venantius, can the government succeed in regulating the sector? You think to a greater extent they can, but looking at the other side, they will not be able to do so.
Vanessa, can the government regulate this sector? Yes. Is the government regulating this sector? That is where the problem lies, like Mr. Ngalim was saying. Because if we say that the government cannot regulate this sector, then we are saying that there is another structure or another sector in this country that is above the government, which I don't think there is. There is no sector above the government. The government can decide to do what they want. Because there is, once you are in this country, you are not above the law. Now, when we look at how can the government regulate this when it comes to fees, the government should say that in every secondary school from Forms 1 to Up6, the school fee should not be above a particular price. For example, just say it should not be above 100,000 francs. The government can decide to say in any higher institute of learning, the school fee should not be above 200,000 francs, for example. The government can do it. It is not above the government. The government can decide to say that in every classroom, no student or the enrollment should not be above 50. Like we have the case with COVID-19 now. The government has brought out the rules. The government has brought out the number of students per class that must be respected. Are they being respected? That's where the problem lies. The government can do it. But the problem is the government is not doing it. Mr. Ngalim was talking about book list. At one point I asked myself, what is the purpose of this book list even? Because when schools are reopening, September, August, September, that's when they always produce this list. And I remember for the last 2 years, according to what the government was preaching, I don't need to go to any school to ask them, give me a book list. No. Once I go just to any bookshop and I just simply tell them that my child is in class 4, They know that in class 4, in the English subsystem of education, this textbooks they are using is 5,000 francs. This one is 2,500. This one, and I buy them. But Vanessa, I will tell you that school A is using their own book because it was written by the uncle or the niece or the child of the proprietor, and school B is using their own book. Where is government's control here? What is the purpose of this national book list? Is it that the government cannot control it? They can. But those who are supposed to regulate it are not doing it. They are not doing it because, like he said, they know what comes in when they come down to the school to regulate. It's just like trying to find out, is the government, look at the law, the government has said that every worker in every private sector must be insured. And then we go back to the school. How many teachers are insured in our lay private schools? How many teachers have been registered at the National Social Insurance Fund and in our lay private school? But we have inspectors from this National Social Insurance Fund that come down to school and then pretend that they are carrying out inspection. What do they inspect? Do you think that you come to enter the office and you ask the proprietor, how many teachers do you have? The proprietor will tell you, I have 48 teachers. How many are registered in CNPS? And the proprietor will say 48. It doesn't happen. But then, all those laws are there. The problem here is, that's why I said the government can, and the government, that's why I say yes and at the same time no. The government can, that is yes. The government cannot, because the government has not succeeded in having, at one point I say, those who are morally upright to carry out the task. Because it is the question of bribery and corruption that plays in here. Because once you come down, you are being corrupted from doing your work, because you take what will be hidden to you, the money that will be given to you under the table, and then you go, and we end up, exploiting parents, end up exploiting teachers who are there working. If we take the case of non-respect of barrier measures, how many schools are respecting it? So all this put together, you see that the government can succeed in regulating it, but the government is not doing
it. Thank you very much, Mange Venatius. Derek, one last word before we go.
I think the word I would say here is the various stakeholders, teachers, parents, the students themselves, they're supposed to help the government to do the job they're supposed to do, because at the end of it is just a cooperation in evil. Lead the parents and grow fat.
Lead the parents and grow fat. Thank you very much for that, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of today's edition. That is the problem we have raised, and probably calling on the competent authorities to take charge and stand up and sit and regulate this lay private sector, teaching all our students or teaching all Cameroonian youths. See you tomorrow. Do take care and have a blessed night in the company of programs on DBS Television.